So we're so thrilled to bring these next guests to the Rail Talk studio. Returning champion, the CEO of HISA, Lisa Lazarus, and the executive director of HIWU, Ben Mosier. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. It's obviously a busy time always in the world of HISA as we try to organize and civilize things on the race in the world of racing. But one of the reasons that Lisa wanted to come on was we had Michelle Yu on a couple of weeks ago, and we had a long discussion, some parts about HISA. I think a lot of it focused on the idea of provisional suspensions, because we asked her about the development that HISA had decided to lift a lot of provisional suspensions retroactively and also change the criteria for which provisional suspensions are levied. So I want to play this clip. This is clip one, Nathan, that when Michelle and I were talking about provisional suspensions, and she mentioned kind of the delay sometimes in getting split samples back.
I'm very happy that they are going to lift some of these that, would fall into the category. But also, I think all the provisional suspension is crazy. Now, I feel like we do need a little bit more of an accelerated program, because right now there's guys that got bad tests in the beginning of summer and we haven't even heard anything about it, that we know are floating around out there. So does it need to be 6-7 months down the road? No, but can you figure this out and get the split sample back and get it done within 30 days? Sure.
Yeah, I mean, so that's something I definitely want to follow up on, because, provisional suspension makes sense if the process is expedited and quick and able to come to a verdict. I have heard these concerns or complaints that some of the split samples or the confirmations are coming back slower. How do you respond to what Michelle said? We'll start with you, Lisa.
Yeah, can I just start by, I think I want to just back it up a little bit if that's okay, because I think one of the things that was missing from the conversation is an understanding of where the provisional suspension concept comes from and what it's intended to do, right? And I think this gets lost on a lot of people. First of all, I'm not sure if it was clear, so I want to make it clear here that it's only ever applied to what we call banned substances, which are the doping substances, the substances that, according to our program, should never be in a horse's system. So they've never, ever been applied in therapeutic overages, which is obviously the vast majority of the positive tests that we receive, right? Now, the reason why they're used, and they're also used in horse sport, like the FEI, the International Federation for Horse Sport, uses them as well. And really what it is it's a tool to protect all of the competitors, in our situation, trainers, who are competing cleanly. So what the hypothesis is we find a trainer who has one horse that has a steroid or clenbuterol or EPO. The risk is that their other horses have the same. And we don't want to, we feel like the greater good is to protect you, John, your horses or West Point's horses that are lining up in the gate beside that trainer's horses, of the risk that they could possibly also have those substances in their system. And as we all know, winning a race, I mean, there's such minute margins of victory. Often it's by a nose, or you're really trying to figure out who won. And obviously, anything that's performance enhancing could make a difference. And so the perspective from most trainers is, oh my God, that could happen to me. And I appreciate that. There's obviously a lot of empathy. But it's important to understand that the only reason it was ever put into place was because the vast majority of trainers are competing fairly or doing the right thing, and they shouldn't have to compete against trainers that aren't. And we all know with service and all that, it's very hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube. We can make maybe the other trainer, whole through fine repayment and purse repayment, but the gambling public never gets a do-over there. And so that's the point. So I think the reason why we changed, and I'm going to pass over to Ben, is that we recognize that we were actually doing a pretty good job with the expeditious review and culmination and closure of these cases. And so it wasn't really necessary. We still believe it's necessary in the case of trainers who have more than one horse with the same substance, and also where a barn search turns up the same banned or doping substance that the trainer's horse tested positive for, then you have a much higher degree of evidentiary certainty. And in those cases, we want to protect the clean trainers. So I'll pass to Ben to talk more about the timelines.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. On average, both banned and with controlled medications, we're seeing cases solved or resolved, I guess, within 75 days on average. And that includes from the collection of the sample through B analysis and full arbitration. So, I mean, like it or not, I think the provisional suspension was helping push those along at times. But I do think the rest of the process is still in place, where even with kind of moving back on the imposition of these provisional suspensions, hopefully we still see those averages carry on with how long these are taking. We do have a number of cases that go on through additional appeals. And so, yes, are there still pending cases out there from even in 2023? Sure. But those have gone through appeals processes all the way through the FTC and maybe even into federal court. So those would be why those cases would still be considered pending. But when we're talking about just, arbitration up into the what's called the internal adjudication panel or the arbitral body, those are moving very quickly, definitely much faster than in the old state systems.
And one thing I want to just point out, because it may not be clear, and this might be what Michelle was referring to, is that because of provisional suspensions, you hear about the banned substance cases resolving much more quickly, right? Because it gets publicized. Obviously, everyone knows the trainer's provisionally suspended, and so it's out there in the public forum. And ultimately, also, it's important to know that every trainer gets credit for that time served against their final suspension. And to date, under HISA and HIWU, there hasn't been any trainer who's served longer than as a provisional suspension what the arbitrator ultimately ordered. So nobody ever served any time that they shouldn't have in the end. But the thing that I think maybe Michelle is focused on is the therapeutic overages of controlled medications. We don't make those public until they're much further along in the process, because the fact that it's a therapeutic and it's not as serious, and that need to notify the public isn't as important. So those really don't get publicized until the final decision. And so that's why it may seem like there's more time that has passed. It's just really about what the rules say about public disclosure.
John, before you ask about contamination, I just have a quick follow up on that. Because I think some of the disconnect is it's not like other sports where if you suspend an athlete, well, they just sit on the sidelines and do nothing. With horses, you're in charge of the care of 30, 40, 50, who knows, however many horses. So it's not easy to unwind that operation so quickly, especially if you're going to be able to jump back in if the case goes in your favor and start training again. So can we just also clarify for the public, what happens to the trainer's horses when they are provisionally suspended?
So I'll give maybe a sort of a broader view, and then Ben can give a more technical answer. But essentially, if they want the horses to have published workouts or run in races, they have to transfer those horses to another trainer. However, if they don't want to do that and they just want to wait it out, because also they can get a provisional suspension hearing very quickly. Provisional hearings are available within a few days, within a week. They can still take care of their horses. They're still allowed to care for their horses, still allowed to be on the backside. They just can't have them race or work in the trainer's name.
Any horses that were entered into a race prior to the official serving of the provisional suspension could still race as long as they were injured before that. So, but after that, they are allowed to continue to care for their horses on the backside while, like Lisa said, we've had trainers request a provisional suspension hearing. And it's just a hearing with one arbitrator to hear the details of that particular case and try to decide in a hurry if that provisional suspension is warranted. Meaning, is there a risk to the integrity of competition with this person and the positive test, right? And so we've had multiple of those happen, and they can happen very very quickly within 48 hours. Sometimes they may want a week to put together their defense and talk to the arbitrator. So And we've had a couple overturned, by the way. So they go both ways.
So from the time that a sample is taken until the time you guys see the lab result, whether it's let's use a split sample. Let's say it come back positive, and then a split sample is tested. What's the time frame on that?
Yeah, so let's take a step back. So we mandate all laboratories to report test results to us, positive or negative, within 10 business days after the receipt of that sample to the laboratory. And we're shipping samples essentially every 48 hours or more, depending on if it's a weekend or a holiday. Those types of things have to be considered. But 10 business days, most negatives are reported within 5 to 7. Positives require an additional step called confirmation testing. So that can take up to 10 business days, depending on the substance. At that moment in time, all the results flow through HIWU and my results team. We take a very comprehensive look at every adverse analytical finding that comes through our door before we report anything to a trainer. So that includes scientific review, it includes a review of the chain of custody to make sure that all of our responsibilities are upheld. We also look at lab packs and things like that. Once we serve a notice to a trainer, they have essentially 7 days from that day to request a B sample or a split sample analysis. Okay. At that, we will then go out and request other labs' availability to conduct the B sample analysis, get the sample shipped from one lab to another. The lab that did the A sample does not do the B sample. And then we're on average about 15 to 20 days from the time that the B sample arrives at the new laboratory. So if you add all that together, right, of sample being reported to HIWU plus 7 days to request the B plus additional shipping time, we're looking at about 30 days by the time a B sample reports back. And so that's happening, I think, relatively quickly. When I hear horror stories of prior jurisdictions, I know that it was taking upwards of 60, 90 days sometimes to get just split samples back. So we've really expedited that process, I feel like.
Okay. So it's not, because that's a common misconception, I think, amongst trainers, is that, that they're kind of hanging in the balance for months at a time. But it sounds like, just through the way that you guys have explained it, that it's not months. If anything, it's weeks, and that's only because you're asking for an additional sample in the case of a positive finding.